Hello and welcome to Eat Your Backyard, my YouTube channel, where I have been doing this for about 10 years now. We are up to 36,000 subscribers strong, and I hope you will join our community if you're not part of it already. If you are part of it already, thank you very much. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about choosing the best banana plant for your space. Perhaps you live in Florida like I do, and we'll focus on some of those conditions because it is so keen to grow bananas here in Florida. However, even if you just have a greenhouse or a place to grow, enough space to grow a banana, there's probably a banana tree that will fit your space. And we'll get into everything you need to know to make that decision. I'm also going to give you the places where you can get banana plants. They call them pups, the baby ones, shipped right to your front door. So stay tuned for that. Also look down in the video description for those links, and I'll give you all kinds of advice. So let's dive right into it. And in the first part of this video, I want to talk about Florida, specifically where I live. I live on a tropical barrier island, let's say. And Florida's warm climate is very conducive. I would claim it is a banana plant paradise of sorts, and that the climate is ideal for bananas. And there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, it is super warm. Very warm. I mean, there's nothing hotter than a Florida summer except for maybe the Sahara. And the other thing is it is very humid. Now, those two factors contribute greatly to the success of banana trees. It's the humidity and the warmth. So if you're going to grow a banana plant, whether it's in an inside environment in a greenhouse or in a outdoor environment, you're going to need to provide those two things. Keep in mind that a banana plant will likely not survive a freeze. There are some varieties which are much more cold hardy that grow even as far north as, say, Alabama, the Gulf Coast, and so on. But once you get much farther than that, if you have the roots freeze, they're pretty much going to bite the dust every time. So those two factors really make Florida the perfect place to grow bananas. However, the other thing that also facilitates the growth of bananas is a nice loose soil. Now, that can be a loose organic soil with lots of organic components to it, but the sandiness of the soil, in my opinion, really allows a banana plant to spread out. And they'll clump and grow in all directions. Most of the varieties will do that fairly aggressively. Florida is the home of numerous banana varieties, that's for sure, offering choices of all kinds of fruit. And that I mean choices in terms of the size, in terms of the color of the fruit, sometimes yellow, green, red, purple, and also the flavor. Now, if you're going to get into growing bananas, think about what's important to you. For some people, they're like, I'm not really going to eat that many bananas. And that's totally legitimate, of course. And you might want one that is more decorative. There are some varieties that are very red and purple, and they have these beautiful leaves. The banana leaves are just these rubbery, giant leaves, so they immediately give that tropical appeal. So those might be a very good choice if you're doing the front of your house. I always say don't plant any fruit in the front of your house that you're not willing to part with, because it's awfully tempting for people walking by to pick it. I will tell you, I plant a decent amount of fruit in my front yard, and I'm never surprised when it has been picked and eaten. I almost consider that is why I planted it there, is for people to pick and eat it. Not that I encourage that, but I certainly don't discourage it, or else I wouldn't have planted it out on the road. And in medieval times, they would actually plant along the fruit orchards trees along the roads in Europe in order to provide fruit for the people that go by, to dissuade them from going into the orchards. So, human nature, let's consider it and be reasonable. I'd claim I have a cactus fruit plant in my front yard, and it has almost never had a fruit that has gone all the way, because eventually somebody comes by and picks it. And the other thing about Florida that's so great is the long growing season. This allows for basically all year round banana harvests. And the idea of having a banana plant is really kind of silly, because you don't have a banana plant. You have a banana plant which immediately starts growing shoots off the side. Well, not immediately, but over the course of years, shoots off the side, and it expands in a clump. So what you really want is a number of banana plants that produce these clumps to produce a super clump. So same thing with pineapples. When you're growing pineapples, you're growing bananas, you don't just want to have one. Your goal is to have a clump that produces pretty much a never-ending flow of either pineapples or bananas, in this case bananas. And that's what I've achieved many times. I actually had a very large banana grove of Cavendish bananas in my area where my chicken coop is now years ago, and I transplanted all those banana plants over to another area of my yard, and now I have the banana grove there. And I'm not at the point where I have basically a harvest a month, but pretty close. When I had it over on the other side of the yard and it was about 8 years old, the grove, 6 to 8 years old, I was getting bananas once or twice a month. I was able to do a harvest, and that's really how you want to do it. If you don't have enough property for that, maybe just a smaller variety in a smaller space, but realize they are going to expand, and you need to have a pot or a container, if you're going to grow them in containers, that allows for that expansion. And when those pups come up, to be able to separate them off. So a continuous supply of fresh fruit is really my goal when it comes to growing bananas. So I pick a variety that is a heavy producer, and there are a number of bananas that are heavy producers. And when you start to think about varieties, which is the next part of this video, which is banana varieties, you want to find what the perfect match is for you. There are bananas that actually have seeds in them. Did you know that? Leave a comment down in the video comments if you've heard of that before, or you know about a banana variety that you think works best for a certain situation, or you've had good luck with. I'm sure everybody would like to hear that, find out about that. But there are actually varieties that have seeds. Now, do you want bananas with seeds in them? Probably not, but isn't that interesting? You typically don't think of that. The kinds of bananas you get at the grocery store are very different than the kinds of bananas you might encounter in a Florida backyard. Explore the characteristics of the hundreds of varieties of bananas, and we're not going to go into all of them here, but we're just going to say that there are a few varieties that are very, very popular, and those include Cavendish, Ladyfinger, Red Daca, and the list goes on and on and on of good varieties. That's half the fun. And maybe you want to have, if you have enough space, have a whole bunch of different varieties, but I'm going to tell you, you'll probably over time lose track of what the varieties are. At least I do. And then I could just go, those are bananas. But I can tell you that the bananas that I grow, the small Cavendish and Ladyfinger bananas that I grow in my yard, they are 10 times better than anything I've ever had in a grocery store. I mean, sweetness and a flavor profile which is so wonderful compared to just the kind of generic flavor of grocery store bought bananas, which come from who knows where, sprayed with who knows what, whereas bananas you grow in your backyard, you know what goes on to them. Now, I don't use any pesticides on my bananas, and I don't use any artificial fertilizers. So I know my bananas are as pure as I can get in terms of those two areas. I use rabbit manure, bunny poo, for my fertilizer, and that is a really high nutrient fertilizer that works very well and draws in worms and millipedes and all the kinds of things you want there to help provide vermiculture, or the worm castings, the insects castings that really turbocharge your banana grove. But we'll perhaps dive into that topic a little bit more in another video. I have lots of videos on the Eat Your Backyard channel about vermiculture, about bunny manure, about my thoughts on composting. That's another great thing to do. I will say, when you're growing a banana tree, the leaves that come off, they almost are like paper. I always just kind of leave those around the clump itself to just degrade back into the soil. That which those banana leaves are made of actually contain the nutrients which that banana tree needs. So you create this loop in the permaculture system that's quite good. The other thing is different varieties ripen at different times of the year. So you can consider that. All the information's online for you to know about all that stuff. So just look into it, And then also you might look into where, if you're in Florida, if you're in South Florida, there's a lot of different options. If you're in Central Florida, less, and I'll list some of those in the description of where you might get those. And if you're in Northern Florida, even less, but even less varieties. So as you go south in the state, more varieties, much easier to grow. Central Florida, about halfway. North Florida, even less. And then you might even get up as far as like Alabama, Georgia, where you could grow some varieties of bananas, but you're really on the edge of being able to pull it off. And it's the conditions that drive that. And the next thing I want to talk about is choosing the right banana plant. Okay, so let's consider what the factors are. First of all, the plant size. Some banana trees plants will get to be 15, 20 feet tall. No kidding. Giant banana plants. I've seen those, and they're amazing. I mean, absolutely amazing. But you've really got to consider what that means. And these are plants that don't have a strong root structure. So in the winds, they'll typically blow over. We're going to talk about that here just in a second, about the factors for growing them successfully. But realize they will tend to tip. So if you have a tall banana tree and you're in a place with high winds, like I'm right near the ocean, that would never cut it. They would just be whipped to shreds perpetually. And that's the other thing, is banana leaves, they tend to tear. They have like flag leaves, and they tear into little pieces. So eventually you'll see the edge of the leaves, and they still grow okay, but eventually they'll just be shredded, you know. And so I tend to want something that's a little lower, that isn't taking the full force of the east winds, which we get here in coastal Florida. And especially during a hurricane, they just get absolutely annihilated. Good news is, one cracks over, 3 more grow, typically. So we don't have to sweat it too much. The other thing is the size of the fruit. Most of the varieties you'll find in backyards in Florida are small, let's say 4 inches or so, as opposed to the, you know, maybe foot-long ones or thereabouts that you get in the grocery store, typically the Chiquita banana type of deal. But you know, you can pick what you want in that regard. And if you go to the least sweet side of the spectrum, which is something like a plantain, which is far less sweet than a typical banana, but also pretty hardy growers, you know, that's another option. They're typically a little bit bigger, the plantains, but they are more vegetable-like than fruit-like, I would claim. So that's another option I just call out here briefly. There are certain varieties which are not as pest-resistant as others. The varieties I mentioned of Cavendish, certainly Cavendish. The other one is Musa, is another one that I would say is a very good pick. I think Cavendish is a type of Musa, but a Musa is a family of bananas. I would claim those are generally speaking very tolerant to disease and pests. But there are some that are very problematic when it comes to pests. I've heard of ice cream bananas and others that seem to get some kind of problem. If you're looking at what would you do to deal with that, well, I would recommend something like a neem spray, which is a type of organic just oil like that you can spray onto the leaves. Another thing that you could do is to create a type of organic pest deterrent made of dish soap and crushed garlic and onions and water, and spray that all over. You know, bugs don't like that, so that separates them. And another thing is to just not sweat the bugs that much. When they come and decimate your stuff, you kind of let it happen and then recoup when they're gone, because they will typically not stay forever, even if they wipe you out. But I've never had that happen with banana plants where I'm at, and we've got bugs galore. I claim we probably have every bug there is in Florida in my general area, even some creepy crawlies that we don't want, like brown widow spiders. We call them meaty boys. We see them, they're up over our heads in between they're giant, look like black widow spiders, but they're white. Sometimes we see those. So yeah, lots of pests, but I haven't found much of a problem with the bananas. The coconuts, certainly. The bananas, not as much. Research reliable nurseries where you are. Online retailers is a good option, I'd claim. Banana pups will ship well. They tend to be fairly resilient. They tend to be okay with being cut and left somewhere as long as you don't dry them out. So I would say that's a good option. That's why look in the description. I'm going to provide some links, and you can go there to potentially get some shipped to you. That, you know, you've got to figure the cost of gas, I do at least, to drive to South Florida from where I'm at. That's going to be about a 3.5 hour drive there and back. You know, what is the cost of that compared to the cost of ordering something online? So I consider those kinds of things. But if you're lucky enough to have bananas within striking distance, well, then get on it, you know, would be my advice. I've even found certainly that Home Depot and Lowe's in my area carry the Cavendish quite frequently, because they're a dwarf variety. That's the cool thing about the Cavendish. They only get to be about 6 to 8 feet tall, generally stay pretty compact, but I found they don't have the production of the slightly larger varieties of Musa that you might end up choosing if you're looking for fruit production. And when you buy a banana plant, if at all possible, ensure that it is free of black spots on the leaves, dead leaves. The lower leaves will always die. They die as they get older, but where the youngest leaves are they should look healthy and green. If you see problems there, sometimes you'll see 20 pots of bananas, and they range just like anything. Pick the good ones. Pick the one that is as pest-free or as problem-free to start with. And I would also look at the width of the trunk of the plant. It should be a little wider as opposed to skinnier. That's a good health part. A banana will store starch in its roots. So it's all about what's in the root ball. And sometimes a pup will start shooting up and then it'll die. That's okay, but that means that it doesn't have enough nutrients in starch built up in the root ball to sustain that pup, and it'll die off, and another one will come up and make it. So, it's a matter of really feeding it what it needs. And I think it needs bunny turds, personally. But you could use granular fertilizer. You could use liquid fertilizers, certainly, but, I'd prefer not to. That's for sure. But that's a capability I've developed in my yard through Thumper and Penelope the rabbit over many years, to have a copious supply of bunny manure always available in my yard. If you're into permaculture, I'd recommend you get some bunnies, for sure. Another big factor, the next thing we're going to talk about, is how to care for bananas, planting them and caring for them, setting up your banana plant for success. And there are some techniques for planting bananas that work better, including making sure that the soil you use is organic. Now, I tend to use soil that comes from, that I make, that God makes, but that makes in my compost bin, and that I then will put around. I will actually put the soil under. I'll dig a hole deeper than the depth of the banana tree, and I'll put that composted soil down, which is consisting of banana leaves and everything else in my yard, down below the dirt ball and all around it. And then when I plant that in there, I pack it around the sides, but not too tight. I leave it loose enough that I can give it a good watering. I mean, a really deep watering. But when you do that, combine the soil that's surrounding it into that composted soil. So you kind of I generally try to make like about a 50-50 mix in that intermediary layer between where the banana is, the surrounding dirt, and then the interface with the existing soil around it, which in my yard is just basically beach sand. So it's going to be growing in beach sand eventually, and which is enriched with compost around it on a continuing basis around the top of it, and then also the manure. But that's the approach I use, and it tends to work pretty well. You have to make sure you plant bananas in a place that has adequate sunlight. They like full sun. There are some varieties which do okay in like less sun, partial sun, but no banana is going to do well in the shade. You're going to need sun, and I would say plant them in a place with full sun. Now that comes with a certain concern as well, especially in Florida, as they will dry out very quickly. So you also have to make sure you water them. And you can tell when a banana plant needs to be watered because they'll start to wilt a bit. They'll start to, I need water. So look for that sign. I think it's good to let them get a little dry and then water them again. But when you plant them at first, really soak them down. I mean, I would just, get a hose and just let it run and run and run and flood it and just let that water seep down, down, down. And I think that makes the little holes, the little drain holes down into the soil, that those roots will then follow, because that banana is going to start growing right away if you do things correctly. Now, there is a time to plant bananas, which I claim is, right about now in March. It's about the right time in my area, Central Florida. It's past the last danger of a freeze and starts to get very warm. Time to put them in the ground. If you plant them right before winter, then the cold winds might burn the leaves. That happens. Here sometimes it gets a little bit cold and the leaves get burned, and that's not what you want. You want to give it every opportunity to thrive. So really best to go just after the last freeze, give it maximum growing season to vegetate and build that root ball. Do those steps I described, keep it watered, but don't overwater it. You also don't want it to rot. That can be a thing if you're saturating it constantly. So saturate it completely when you plant it, then allow it to dry, but not bone dry. Hit it again with a decent amount of water. Let it dry again. So that's the process I've used to produce copious amounts of bananas. Okay, now let's talk about enjoying your harvest, which is something I love to do. If you've ever had a fresh banana off a freshly picked banana tree, you know what I'm talking about. It is one of the greatest joys in my life, is to eat a delicious fresh picked banana. And when you pick the banana stalk, you're going to have 40, 50 bananas. So have a plan. Can you eat all these bananas? Maybe you can, but I probably won't, so I like to give them away. For me, growing the fruit, one of the biggest joys I get is to give the fruit to others and to get that experience of giving. I love that. I mean, the fruit, in my perspective, was given to me, and then I'm giving that fruit out. So it's just like a flow of positive activity. But if you don't have people to give them to, or you don't want to give them, or whatever the thing is, or you maybe you have enough people that you can eat 60 bananas, like you have a large family. I have 4 kids, and at one point we probably could have eaten 60 bananas by the time they were finished ripening. Because that's the other thing, is that as you harvest them, there'll be some that typically on the lower end of the banana flower, where the bananas form, it will be ripe, and then they ripen up the trunk. So, you know, you kind of have a time span. Some people hang them. You know, if you hang them outside, in my area, the squirrels are going to come in and start eating those bananas because they love them too. But if you hang them in a cool, dark place, they'll ripen gradually. You just got to keep an eye on them, because sometimes they all kind of ripen up at once, I found, and that can be problematic. But when that happens, one thing you can do is freeze them. I love doing that, especially the little bananas. If you know how to do it, you can freeze them. Pick them when they're nice and sweet and ripe, not too sweet, like just the perfect spot. Ripen them in pick them and then peel them, put them into bags, freeze them, and then dip them in, say, dark chocolate. Put a popsicle stick in one end, dip it in the dark chocolate, and make banana pops. That is gnarly. So that's a good way to go. Or just keep them frozen like that for putting in smoothies. You know, you just take some out of the freezer, pop them in a smoothie. That's something I like to do. I freeze a lot of them. We get like showers of mangoes, so I'll have frozen mangoes. I'll have frozen, sometimes mulberries, and frozen bananas, and I take all those and put them in a fruit smoothie, and it's easy to just grab them right out of frozen bags of fruit. So that's a great way to preserve them. They freeze quite well, but you know, just like anything, you don't want to have it in there for a year. You want to kind of use them, get through them, so that you can make best use of them. And I know there's other ways to utilize them, but that's my favorite way to deal with them. Yeah, and you know, I just love to see on the counter in the kitchen fresh bananas picked from the yard, mangoes picked from the yard. The best is mangoes and bananas all together in the same bowl. Pretty wonderful, without any doubt. Do you have tips on how to grow bananas in your yard? I'd love to hear about them down in the comments, that's for sure. Maybe you know some things that I don't know, and I would like to learn. I'm sure you do, so let me know. Are you new to banana growing? Are you wanting to try it, curious about it? Well, I would encourage you to dive right in and go for it. Go ahead and grab some bananas off of Amazon at the link below and see what happens. You know, I don't think you'll regret it. That and a bag of potting soil and a big old pot, and you're off and going, as long as you have the sunlight, the water, the will, and the enthusiasm. Nothing great was ever accomplished in this world without enthusiasm. So that is the main ingredient, I would claim, in your success of just about anything in your life, quite honestly. You kind of get to choose, even though it can get unfortunate at times. I think we get to choose. So, hey, if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up down in the YouTube thing, and also leave a comment. That helps in the algorithm, certainly. And go check out my original music channel. I have an original music channel called Hunnitap, Hunnitap, where I list all my original music, which is also available on all major music platforms. I did go under the name Jedi Jingle Maker. You may find it in some places under that name, but I transitioned over to the name Hunnitap fairly recently. I have 4 albums and many singles, and I will hope that you will listen to them. I also am going to be doing a lot of what I call garden sessions in my backyard, while I will play my original music for all of you in live streams, and that should be a lot of fun, where we can kind of jam out in the food forest, maybe pick a banana and play some Santana. Okay, thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day. Don't forget, eat your backyard.